We are very fortunate this morning to have an incredible keynote speaker joining us all the way from Denver, Colorado via Washington, D.C. He is the Director of Solutions Engineering at Blackboard, Inc. Help me in welcoming Mr. David Gibson.
Good morning. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a privilege to be back in Texas. I thought about visiting my parents. They decided to tour the Panama Canal. I said, fine, be that way. The tour or conversation that I want to start today, or to continue in many cases, may actually inspire some excitement and some, you may even feel compelled to applaud or to yell finally or yay, I'm glad you're doing that. That'd be fine, that'd be wonderful, but I do want to emphasize that some of the things that I'll talk about today we're working on, so they haven't actually come out yet. Some of the stuff that we're working on is so exciting that people start asking me detailed questions. I'm like, well, they haven't built it yet, I don't know. So I wanted to emphasize that as we move forward. Because what we are doing at Blackboard and the conversation we've been having with you and your colleagues around the world is about reinventing and reimagining and innovating in education. And as we've been doing that, one of the catalysts, one of the driving forces on our side has been new leadership. So as Jay Bott became a leader in the company, and he spent his first 6 months listening and talking to you and your colleagues, to listening to what was going on in the industry, and he wanted to stop and say, look, what is Blackboard? Who is Blackboard, and how are we going to move forward and make our contribution to what's going on? And so a vision and a mission statement were put together. There we go. A vision and a mission statement were put together, and this is where we are coming from as we contribute our to what you are working on and what you're doing and the education of these students. So the vision and the idealized world, if you will, is a world inspired to learn. And the mission that comes out of that, what are we doing, is we are reimagining education. We're thinking again about how are we contributing, what can we do to help support the work that you're doing. And when we're looking at reimagining education, it's important to look what's driving, what's pushing on the work that's going on. It's been going on for hundreds of years. So what's going on today, what's pushing the agenda and the change that's going on. We've identified several themes or trends that are pushing on the work that we're doing, that are guiding the way that we move forward together. One of them is the fact that education is very global, right? Now, at Lee College, that may not be as global as it is at A&M. But you have students coming from all over the world. You also have students who are all over the world, and so we need to look at how we can support your work with that in mind. Non-traditional learners, I find this one kind of interesting because it's not even that. At first, I thought non-traditional learners referred to a small subset, right? Like a non-typical learner. In fact, non-traditional is typical, and a traditional has become relatively unusual. Possible exception at A&M. Consumer preferences, alternative models, the students and the people who are looking at education, working in education, coming to be educated, the consumer preference issue. How do I learn? How do I consume this material? What am I going to work with? And then this question of learner-centric, big data. So looking at data and how all of this digitization that's been going on over the last 20 years in education, has resulted in a lot of data. How do we use that? How do we take advantage of that for the benefit of our students? Because if it's learner-centric, that's why we want to know and why we're looking at these things. And then, of course, as we all know, it's all about this sort of thing, right? And so how do I consume information, content? How do I learn with the tools that are in front of me at the moment? And today, though, I want to just focus on this question of learner-centric, because this is really the heart of things for us at Blackboard and certainly for you, because you have classrooms full of students. And as we're looking at this question of putting the student at the center, then we want to try to know, who are these students? So that non-traditional question comes into play. There was an article on Tuesday in the year of the 100th anniversary of World War I on Veterans Day. The Seattle Times published an article about veterans moving into the higher education space in Washington State. So it's a snapshot. It's not Texas, but I didn't find an article in Texas. So I found this one in Washington. So with this snapshot, we see a huge number. We have lots of students coming into the environment, very non-traditional, very diverse experiences, both in diverse for being in the military, different experiences within the military, but then also having that military experience, having been deployed to Afghanistan or other locations around the world. These students are coming in large numbers and measurable numbers. And also I would call attention when we talk about numbers to some of the dollar figures that are attached to this, because this becomes a pressure point on higher education. How are we dealing with this? And there are people who are wanting to hold us accountable because they're spending enormous sums of money for this education. So it becomes a pressure point. And so we're looking at these students, though. We want to keep the students at the center of things. This student, for example, comes back to higher education. He's working through one of the colleges in Washington State, and he's got a family. He has a wife. He has a child. He's been deployed. He feels nervous and uncertain about coming back into higher education because he feels that he doesn't fit the model. You know, we have a social model that says you come right out of high school into higher education, and we all know that for many of us that doesn't work so well. And but you know, these students are coming in feeling a little bit of that reverse pressure that they don't necessarily fit in. Not to mention the fact that they may also be struggling as veterans with all sorts of other issues that we as instructors and as institutions have to figure out, how do we deal with this? How do we help them? How do we support them? And how do we make them successful? How do we move them out and retain them in the program? And as you know, as we all know, it's about getting them through to the end of their certificate or their degree program. So at Blackboard, we're hearing all of this. We are very much in the midst of this with you, and we are moving very methodically to putting the student at the center of everything we think about. So as we're thinking about where do we put our time and our energy, how do we support the work that you're doing, what sort of changes do we need to make so that we do a better job of that, it puts the student at the center, because they're at the center of your classroom. Putting the student at the center does raise all sorts of issues, as we've already alluded to. And this creates a relatively challenging environment for the institution as well as for you in your classroom. And so at an institutional level, we've got some pressures that are being put on. There are, there are lots of these, but some of them I saw in this article that was published Tuesday. There's for example, the House of Representatives, who's paying all of this GI money, wants to know, is it working? And, there are challenges here. That's where we get back to the question of data. Is it working? What can we do to do better? Where can we put more energy or more investment in to help out? In Washington, they have a program actually for VA Vet Corps that are designated people on each campus that help the veterans who are coming back into the education system to succeed and to get the resources that they need. So these are some of the challenges that we face as we're moving out into this space. And they're part of a whole rich matrix of challenges that we have as in higher education. So as we're trying to understand how we can help, at Blackboard at least, we're looking at breaking down all of the different pieces and parts that of how we as a group in higher education help these students succeed. How do we organize all of this so that you can teach and the students can learn and they can make their lives and society better. And so we start to look at a bigger Blackboard, for example. So we're supporting the work that you're doing. How do we do that? And we need to be looking at far more. Many of you in the room remember back in the 90s, this little company called Blackboard started up, and they had a learning management system, whatever that was, right? And you probably ran on somebody's on a used machine underneath someone's desk, right? Paul, is that how you ran yours? Pretty much, yes. So when we first started out, it was about the learning management system. We were beginning to digitize things. Well, now we've flipped completely. So we start digitizing and supporting the work of instruction. Initially, we're going to go online. Well, now the learning platform hosts online, face-to-face, doesn't matter. It's a useful tool for supporting the work that you're doing. And so we are looking at bigger and larger questions as well. So as we start to say, okay, we're digitizing all of this, and we're looking at how we can improve that, we're also looking at all of the adjacent issues that get in the way of students succeeding in education. So how do we look at things like getting the right courses offered to the students so that it's appropriate to this geography, it's appropriate to the students that I have coming into my institution. It might be oil and gas here in Baytown. It is certainly not going to be oil and gas in Seattle. And so we're going to look at some of these issues. And as a firm, we're also looking at how do we think through and support the work that you're doing and provide value there. Because these challenges are ones we hear about all the time. So we start out coming in years ago with a learning management system, and then there was some synchronous technologies and some other technologies, and then wait, I'm having trouble deploying these technologies, so then there's services. And so as we start to listen to all of these challenges, we're looking at how do you address all of this while keeping that student and the success of that student at the center of what we're doing. And so we're looking at taking a holistic approach to how we support the work that's going on so that the question of the digitization becomes part of the fabric rather than some sort of object unto itself. Because the computers are great, and some of us really dive into the technology and say, wow, I mean, for its own sake, I want the quiddity, the whatness of technology, right? I'm going to play with computers all day. But most of us don't. And the older I get, the less I do, right? So I'm like, hey, that's great, but I've got other things I want to do on my weekend than rebuild a Linux server from Slackware floppies, right? Now I'm really dating myself. So these technologies and the services and the data and how do we weave all of that together is a challenge that exists here at the institution, and it is one that we also are looking at and how can we help. One of the ways that we've done that is to take all of these different solutions that we've had over the years and try to begin to weave them together into a single story for whatever the challenge is for the particular institution. So that we take things and we stop looking at things from the perspective of point solutions that say, here's a little LMS, and here's a synchronous web conferencing system, and here's a data analysis system, and here's another system over here, and how do they talk to each other? Well, they kind of don't, and so on. So we're beginning to say, look, let's reimagine how we support education from the ground, rather than simply saying, oh, let's improve that product. Well, let's reinvent the business model. Let's readdress and communicate with the customer about how we can really make a difference. And so, for example, those of you who've worked with Learn in the past and work with Learn today, there's been this historical thing that says course delivery and community and content. And we took a step back and said, that doesn't make any sense, right? We need to solve a problem. So you want basic core digital technology for your classroom? It's Learn. It's community, content, course, whatever, right? It's core. It's all of it. So that's all of it. I mean, all you have to do is call up your account manager and say, I want core tomorrow. It's like, oh, renewed. You have all those licenses, right? So it's reinventing our business model. That took finance forever to figure out. Accountants, they get very excited about these things. Learning Essentials is saying, look, I want to go a step further. I'm going to be looking a lot more at online. So it's got Collaborate included in it. So we're looking at it. What we're doing here is changing the perspective to say, let's solve problems together, and we'll pull the necessary technology and services in. So most of these things come together with consultants who come on and help out, right, who are experts who've done this before at 6 other universities and so on. So with that in mind, one of the questions that often comes up is that what are you doing with all of those technologies? Because that's all very grand, right? And it realigns the thinking, it makes sense to a certain degree, and the student, you can see how the student becomes the center of, well, I'm going to solve problems for how we're teaching students. How do I then, then when I drill down that next layer and say, okay, now I'm in my classroom, what are you doing to make that better? Some of the things that we're doing include re-architecting the way the systems actually work. And so with that, we're looking at deep changes that go across all of the technologies and the capabilities that Blackboard brings to universities. And so with the SaaS offering, software as a service, aka cloud, we're looking at how do we address or change the way that these technologies actually function, so that we are starting to address some of the things that get in the way of students learning and teachers teaching. And if we're facilitating that, we need to always be willing to take big, huge steps in order to make a difference there. With Blackboard, with SaaS, with cloud-based technologies, we've been doing this in many places for many years. And so today what we're doing is we're moving into the Learn environment and actually looking at how we can make a difference in the way that the servers actually deliver your content, your instruction, and how do we address that at a deep architectural level so that it's reliable, so that when you go to class, you don't get calls about how the server's down this weekend or it's going to be slow or something of this nature. So with the cloud-based architecture, we're changing the underlying architecture of the system so that it's scalable, so that it, if you suddenly, your department, your program suddenly goes big on doing online testing, that's one of the heaviest load type functions in the system, we're going to be able to just magically expand. It's not magical to the technicians, it's magical to us though. We're, those of us who are actually using the system are like, wow, that's great. I didn't even notice that we just overloaded the system, because you didn't. So scalability, reliability. How many of you have had the joy of realizing that you're doing like an intercession course and someone, the administrator for your Learn system, calls you up and says, we're updating the server this weekend. It will be down, right? This has been a challenge, right? Different technological solutions that might exist out there, well, we've embraced one. So with this new movement towards SaaS, cloud, now please don't go home and call your administrator and say, I don't ever want to hear from you about downtime, because it takes time for these things to roll out, right? But again, remember this is roadmap, right? So the zero time, we've now got the architecture adjusted so that the system never goes down. We can update the system as you're using it. The ability to have a self-healing environment. So if something goes down, some piece of the system, the architecture breaks, a router goes south on you, it will automatically route around all the different layers and pieces and parts rather than just some of the pieces and parts. Being able to be flexible as the system is getting more and more use, does it just automatically get bigger to accommodate more students and more demand? And then being able to innovate, being able to update the system. Today, you know, we were sitting at the table talking about needing to have a student view of your course, right? Well, we've already built that for you. But if your server doesn't have the latest update, then you don't have that yet because it's sitting there waiting in the queue for the time when you can take the servers down. Well, if we don't ever have to take the servers down, new really fantastic features can show up in line as you're moving along, rather than having to wait a year before you even see them. And we continue to invest in this. This is a new architecture change that will continue to grow, and there'll be continued investment, continued adjustment as we move forward. Along with that, we've also been looking at, since we're making those changes to the architecture, how do we look at the way that the user is experiencing the system, so that that also is improved. And here we have the new movement toward a user experience. So what we've done is we took our under this new leadership and under a revised idea and a revised business policy, reimagining how we function as an organization on your behalf, we sent our user experience people who've been gathering research for years from all of you and your colleagues around the world who are like, I don't like the way this works, and I wish this worked better, and you know, why haven't you fixed this yet? It's driving me crazy for the third year, right? A lot of those things, they've always been a little bit handcuffed, right? Because they would improve this little bit, but then everybody's like, oh, too much change, right? So we're beginning to say, look, let's take a step back, right? And if we take a step back and let the UX people take all your feedback over the years and all the knowledge they have about what makes a good human-computer interface, and how do we get to an A+ sort of experience? And so this is where we're beginning to see radical change that we're working on, and we're rolling out. We're going to roll out very iteratively and very slowly so that you will have plenty of opportunity to say, okay, I'm ready or I'm not ready, that sort of thing. So don't anybody panic. It's like, oh, wow, talk about moving my buttons or my cheese or whatever it is you want to use. So here we've got an experience where Beth Carlson is an instructor and is logged into this system. She's got her feed of recent activity. Now everything was given some thought. So everything doesn't need to go in the feed. What's the important stuff? I need the important stuff, right? And I'm an instructor. Wait, I'm a student. Well, that's different stuff, isn't it? So, you know, different ways of putting important things into the feed. But here, you know, I could look in and say, oh, look, there's an assignment. And there's 6 out of my 9 students have submitted. Maybe I don't want to grade just yet. And then I might go into my courses and maybe move into an empty course. Oh, this is my new empty shell for Gen Chem. I want to be able to maybe import some content into this from the last Gen Chem course. I could just take a couple things here, or maybe I want to import we'll take everything, and then we'll probably do a different syllabus this time or whatever. And so then when I come back over here, oh, look, there it is. Yeah, exactly. Wow, that's nice, right? That was easy. I might want to go in maybe in week 1. We're going to, we want to create fluidity in the experience and the workflows. We're reconsidering workflows. Now the engine underneath it is the engine you're using today. So all of that powerful capability is down there, but we've abstracted out your experience of that so that we can reconsider those workflows and adjust them accordingly. So here, for example, I might want to create some new content. I'm going to make a recording to go with some slides. So I've already uploaded some PowerPoint slides into my course, and I go to the recording section, and it says, you've already got some things in week 1. You've already got a set of lecture slides for this course. Ready to record? Yes. So, much more fluid experience to be able to, make the recording and then give it a name and then move back into your course and have your lecture in the course ready to go with the recording already attached to it. In addition, we want to be cognizant that it can take some time to get used to new workflows, and sometimes you don't want to mess with it just right away, or maybe we're going to take a year or so to get all the features and the functions reconsidered with new and better workflows, and you might be using that one feature we haven't gotten to yet. So you can preview your course in the new system, and you can get some detail about what am I using in my course that isn't ready, that I'm going to lose if I go to the new system. And you can say, oh, no thanks, take me back, and I can just keep my course in the old 9.1 sort of framework until I'm ready, right? So we're giving some thought to this question of, if I'm going to change the world for you in a good way, I also need to be cognizant that you might need to move a little bit more slowly. Because if I'm going to keep the student at the center of everything, I have to empower you. And if I am making your life very difficult, I am not keeping the student in the middle of everything. Because the student can't learn if you're not able to communicate with them. So that's the kind of the instructor view, if you will. And then you've got organizations and aggregated messaging coming across from all the different ways that you get messages in the system. Grades, being able to do your grading in line, just like we've been working with, and so on. Then, if I were to go back to my login page, there we go. If I were to go back and log in as a student, now I'm in as a student, so I've got, again, a view that is, I've got my profile, such as I have today. I've got this feed concept where I can go in and say, oh, look, there's a new assignment that's been made available to me. So I want to be able to look at that. What if I were able, as an instructor, to create an assignment and just tick a box, and now there's a discussion board automatically created for the students to be able to chit-chat about the assignment, ask questions. So they can go into the discussion and ask questions about this assignment of each other and possibly of the instructor. Then when I'm ready to start working on the assignment, I want to upload it. I just drag that across into the browser and it uploads. So taking advantage of some of these new technologies that were, if we weren't reinventing, if we weren't reconsidering, if we weren't reimagining how we could do this, we wouldn't be able to use some of these in the old framework, because it's using older technologies and older concepts. Now we're able to take advantage of some of these newer concepts. So here, submit the assignment, and it uploads it. It gives feedback to the student. We want to be constantly reinforcing, yes, that worked. You're good to go. And then they can wait for their grade to appear. As we're looking at these different courses and entering into these courses, one of the aspects we want to do, remember we talked about mobile just briefly, and how that's part of what it means to be student-centric, is what device are they using? Well, what if it didn't matter? How about a tablet? Or how about I move it all the way up into a little phone, and I continue to have access to the experience at 100% of what I would have on a full-sized browser. I can get all of my content, move around into my different pieces, and parts and move into a particular course and be able to see what's going on in the course. As we move out again into the larger view, Sarah goes into this course, immediately pops up the announcement. Nice, right? I mean, it's right there. No, really, I'm telling you, we're doing something. It's important. Pay attention. I know you don't want to read, but it's just 4 words right here. So I go in and I dismiss these announcements. I'm here in the course. I can go in and submit assignments, read the content, and so on, right? I can also have a very integrated, today we've got a pretty integrated sense between, say, the synchronous systems, Lifecycle Collaborate, and the asynchronous learning web pages. But what if we were just able to go into the virtual
errors as class and anyone says independently evolve the similarity? It might not come as a surprise to you that the factors that determine and are responsible for the formation of epithelia and polarity in epithelia in animals are unknown.
So the idea, sorry that was so loud, didn't test that part. Actually, I didn't expect it to even talk. HDMI, it's fancy stuff. All right. So the idea that it's integrated, you'll also notice that that didn't start up any sort of runtime Java type experience and whatnot. So we're trying to look at what are the big problems we hear about from everybody. Daryl's applauding. What are the big problems we hear about that really get in the way of students, right? And you all and your colleagues are very clear that Java runtime environments were, great for doing what they did, years ago, but we've got to get rid of them because it's just too challenging, right? And there are all sorts of issues. You have the right version, does it work right? I'm sorry I can't join the synchronous classroom session because, my computer isn't configured properly. So we're looking for technologies that are going to put the student experience as smooth, uninterrupted as we can figure out how to make it. And so that's where the collaborate piece and the ability to start and to have a synchronous session in a way that requires nothing more than the browser. And so that's, again, work that's underway. So as we're moving through, and I want to keep going here so we don't run out of time. We're also looking at how can we improve your experience so that you can get on with the work of teaching and not be spending as much time with things that we might be able to digitize in a way and automate, right? Well, one thing is that you spend an enormous amount of time, most instructors do, evaluating papers that have been submitted by the students. And what if you could just do that from the couch using your iPad? And you can. This is actually released, so you don't even have to think about roadmap now. No caveat. This is in the iTunes store. And we're going to have it on the Android eventually, but today it's for the iOS. And the idea is that it's an instructor app. And so you log into this, you can see all of your students, you can open up the assignment they've submitted, you can use the end of your finger to mark up, you can give them feedback, audio and video feedback if you like, give them, use the rubric that you may have assigned to this, and then you can control when the grades go back to the Learn system. So you might be sitting there doing some of that, and you do some more a little bit later, and then you do some more a little bit later, and then you say, okay, I'm ready. And you can send some or all of the grades back to the system. But we wanted to take a step further, because when we're talking about putting the student at the center, one of the challenges when you've got 30 or 40 students in a class, or 150 or 300 students in a class, is who's struggling, right? And how do I help them? How do I know that they're struggling when there's so many of them, right? And so we've got the retention center that I hope you've run across and used in Learn today, but we wanted to make sure you had that at your fingertips when you're working on a tablet environment. This concept of working in a tablet, you saw how I took the browser and shrunk it up in different sizes. So in theory, I could be using a browser, but there are some things that if you're in a native app on Droid or on the iOS or on Windows Mobile, you're beginning to take advantage of some of the capabilities that are native to those operating systems. And so we continue to work at improving the dedicated mobile apps, even while we're busy working on making everything mobile friendly. Because there are some things that you can't do from a browser. If you're in the Safari browser, it's tricky to depend on that for notifications when something has changed. But if I have a dedicated app, I get badges and alerts and noise, and my phone sings when I forget to turn it on vibrate. So, happened in the last meeting yesterday. So the mobile app continues to get work. And you can see from some of these pictures, the upcoming mobile app release is going to actually start to look like what the new Learn is going to start looking like as it begins to gradually change over the course of the next year. And so making a mobile experience that takes deeper advantage and, again, reimagines what might a mobile experience when learning look like. How can we facilitate that in the dedicated mobile app versus what we can do inside the browser? And we continue that also with the Collaborate experience where we're talking about synchronous. So again, if I'm thinking about how do I help my student learn, and I'm going to use the tools that I have. If my institution has rolled out this synchronous piece, my student may want to participate from their phone or their iPad or their Droid tablet or whatever, what have you. And so being able to do that is something that we have today, but we continue to look at how can we reinvent that. How can I think again about how this works with additional capabilities and so on. That Collaborate experience we talked about, I want to remove barriers. So being able to look at a synchronous session that requires no plugins, no magical anything, you just simply launch, start, and it goes, using a new technology called WebRTC, which is a new standard for being able to do this in the browser. And we even acquired a firm that specializes in this so that we could get all those developers in the room with everybody else and take advantage of their expertise. High-def video is part of this new standard, so that if you're wanting to have a small group session with students and do that in a synchronous way, you can even get as close as one can digitally to being there with them. All of this is part of our efforts to, again, think again about how do we put the student at the center of things. How do we facilitate and contribute to the work that you're doing? And as we're thinking through that, we wanted to think deeply. And it's both an imperative on our part and a challenge to everyone to think again about how am I working with my students? How am I facilitating the learning of these non-traditional, common, or everyday students, right? Because while they're non-traditional, they are all of the students. And so what am I doing in my work as I'm teaching, as I'm planning the next term, as I'm taking on new capabilities and thinking, I'm going to use that new feature, or I'm going to go find another tool that might help. And why am I doing it? Why am I using the ones that I used last term? So deep thinking about how can I change? How can I reimagine the education that's going on and my contribution to what's being done? It's non-trivial. It's difficult work, and it's difficult work at the firm. And we're, just like the institution, and when you have big changes happen at this institution or your institution, the big changes that have been going on at Blackboard have been enormous. We've completely reorganized the entire firm. And now that I lead my team, I spend a lot of time going, it's okay, it's all right. I know you don't know who to call. We'll find out. It'll be all right. These are big deal. This is a big deal. It's a big deal for us personally as human beings, but we're moving forward to try and solve really challenging problems. At Blackboard, we're having to be very careful as we're moving forward as well, because there are a lot of people using the technologies we already have. And just as you have challenges where you've got a lot of students who are depending upon you to close out this term, to move into the next term, when you're impacting so many people, you move somewhat methodically, you move a little bit carefully, you be thoughtful about it. And one of the things that I particularly like about our new leadership is Jay is quite clear that we will make mistakes. We will not get it all right, and we're going to be transparent about that too. So we apologize in advance if we don't get it quite right? Because that's the way it works, right? When you're teaching a class, you might not get it all right, but we're going to move forward together in an effort to solve the challenges that are in front of us, whether the challenges are that veteran who's been demobbed and he's trying to figure out how to get a good job to feed his family, to take care of his family, and to advance his life and to make a contribution to the world that he lives in. Those are big challenges, and we have an obligation to him and to you to take on the big challenges that we're facing as well, and to move forward with you. And we will probably trip over our shoelaces a couple times. And so we move forward with a lot of input and a lot of partners and a lot of institutions that we're working with, including Lee College, including Texas A&M, including lots of institutions across all of K through 20. It's a big space, it's a challenging space, but it is absolutely worth doing. One of the fun things about working where we do at Blackboard, much like one of the satisfying things about working where you do, is it does make a difference. These are not widgets. This is not about selling, iPhone cases. Well, iPhone cases are great. Lots of people have them, right? And they're fun colors and whatnot. But we're changing the world. You are changing the world and making a difference. And that's important. That's worth doing. And worth doing well, because if we're successful, the degree to which we're successful is the degree to which we create a world where people are constantly learning. I always tell my team, we are always be learning, ABL, 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 because they come to me and say, yeah, I did this presentation, it didn't go all that well. I'm like, so why? What'd you learn, right? I learned never to say that because the instructor on the other end went nuts. Like, that's fine, right? Because you weren't being aware of their world, and now you are, and you've learned more about it. That's good, right? We have to reimagine how we approach these things, how we work together to make a difference in the work that we're doing. And on the Blackboard side, we are reimagining what it means to be the company that we are, the firm that we are, that supports the work that you're doing in all sorts of different ways. Because it's interesting, because we are often perceived as being that company back in the late 1990s that does an LMS. I will have, in fact, someone did come up to me today and said, oh yeah, we stopped using Learn. I'm like, okay. I'm hoping that the solution that you have is helping you solve challenges in education, because we've got a lot of solutions and we're probably still working with you. We're not an LMS company. We're a educational technology firm of services and experts. We have deans of former deans and directors of all sorts of initiatives at different universities here to help you all do the work you're doing so that you can make a difference and reimagine the education that you're working through. And with that, I am going to be here all afternoon to answer any questions you have or continue the conversation, because we do not consider there's a destination on this journey. It is an ongoing work that we do together. and we make the changes and we do the things that we're doing because of the feedback that you all give us. And we'll continue that as we move forward.